I need a DNA test. Right now. Before you sign that birth certificate. Those were the first words my husband spoke after watching our daughter take her first breath. Not, she's beautiful. Not, I love you. Not thank you for bringing our child into the world. Just a cold, calculated demand for proof that crushed whatever remained of my heart in that delivery room. My name is Lily Chen, and I'm 29 years old. 20 minutes ago, I pushed for 3 hours to bring my daughter into this world. My body was still trembling, my hospital gown soaked with sweat, my legs still in stirrups when my husband decided that this sacred moment, this miracle we'd waited 9 months for, was the perfect time to accuse me of infidelity. In front of my mother, in front of his parents, in front of my sister and his brother, in front of 2 nurses and my obstetrician who had just finished stitching me up. The room went absolutely silent. Even the baby stopped crying for a moment, as if she too was shocked by what her father had just said. Dr. Martinez, my OB-GYN, froze with her gloves still on, staring at my husband like he'd just announced he was from another planet. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My sister Lisa actually gasped out loud. But it was my mother-in-law's face that told me everything I needed to know. Eleanor Whitmore didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. "Excuse me?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice hoarse from hours of pushing and screaming. Marcus Whitmore, my husband of 4 years, stood at the foot of my hospital bed in his expensive cashmere sweater. His arms crossed, his jaw set in that stubborn way I'd learned to dread over the past year. He was 34, a successful cardiologist at one of Boston's most prestigious hospitals. And right now he looked at me like I was one of his patients, someone whose symptoms he was clinically analyzing rather than his wife who had just given birth to his child. "You heard me," he said, his voice cold and detached. "I want a paternity test before anything gets filed. Before my name goes on any legal documents." The nurses exchanged horrified glances. One of them, Sarah, who had been coaching me through contractions for hours, took a protective step closer to my bed. "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Martinez said carefully, peeling off her gloves. "This is highly unusual. Perhaps we could discuss this outside." "No," Marcus interrupted, his eyes never leaving mine. "We discuss it right here, right now. I have a right to know if that baby is actually mine." My mother stood up from her chair in the corner, her face flushed with anger. "Marcus, how dare you!" "Stay out of this, Patricia," Eleanor Whitmore cut in smoothly, finally speaking up. My mother-in-law sat perfectly composed in her designer outfit, her Louis Vuitton bag resting on her lap like a shield. "My son has every right to protect himself, especially given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" I heard myself ask, even though part of me already knew this had been planned. This wasn't a spontaneous accusation. This was calculated, deliberate. Marcus pulled out his phone and held it up so everyone in the room could see. On the screen was a photo, grainy but clear enough. It showed me standing outside a restaurant, talking to a man. Just talking, having a conversation on a sidewalk. "This was taken 3 months ago," Marcus announced to the room like he was presenting evidence in a trial. "That's Dr. James Chen, no relation, despite the same last name. He's a pediatric surgeon. They've been having lunch together. Multiple times." My sister Lisa stood up now too, her voice sharp. "James Chen is Lily's cousin. He moved to Boston last year." "Are you seriously?" "So she says," Eleanor interjected smoothly. "But we only have her word for that, don't we? And given that this cousin is also a successful doctor, well," she left the implication hanging in the air like poison. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. This wasn't about the baby. This wasn't even about James. This was about control. This was about Marcus and his mother making sure that I knew my place, making sure that even in this moment, even after carrying his child for 9 months, even after literally just pushing a human being out of my body, they still had power over me. I looked at my daughter, wrapped in a pink blanket, lying in the bassinet next to my bed. She was barely 20 minutes old, and already her father was rejecting her. Already he was making her birth about his suspicions, his paranoia, his need to humiliate me. But here's what Marcus didn't know. Here's what neither he nor his pretentious mother had figured out. Over the past 6 months, as Marcus had become increasingly distant, increasingly controlling, increasingly paranoid about my every move, I had started documenting everything. Not because I suspected this moment would come, but because somewhere deep down, I knew our marriage was ending, and I wanted to be prepared. I had saved every text message where he accused me of things I hadn't done. Every email where he demanded to know my location. Every conversation where he interrogated me about male colleagues. I had recorded arguments where he'd screamed that I was too friendly with patients' family members. I had screenshots of his location history showing him at hotels when he claimed to be working late at the hospital. And I had something else. Something I discovered 2 weeks ago that had made me physically ill. Something that would destroy him if it came out. I had been quiet for the past 6 months. I had been patient. I had been the dutiful wife, trying to save our marriage even as he systematically tried to break me down. But lying in that hospital bed, still bleeding from bringing his daughter into the world, watching him humiliate me in front of everyone I loved, I felt something shift inside me. "Get the test," I said quietly, looking directly at Marcus. My voice was steady now, calm. "Get whatever test you want." He looked surprised. He'd expected tears. He'd expected me to beg, to plead my innocence, to break down. That's what he wanted. That's what this whole performance was designed to do. "But Marcus," I continued, and now I smiled, just a little. "When that test comes back, when it proves what everyone in this room except you and your mother already knows, that this baby is yours, that she's always been yours, that I've been faithful to you every single day of our marriage." I paused, let the words hang in the air. "Then we're going to have a very different conversation." Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. "What's that supposed to mean?" Eleanor demanded, her composure cracking just slightly. I didn't answer. I just reached for my daughter, and Sarah, the nurse, immediately understood. She lifted the baby and placed her gently in my arms. My mother came to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. My sister moved to my other side. Even Dr. Martinez positioned herself at the foot of my bed, a silent show of support. And Marcus stood there, alone except for his mother, suddenly looking less like a successful doctor making a righteous stand and more like a man who had just made a terrible mistake. If you're wondering what happens when someone tries to destroy you at your most vulnerable moment, well, subscribe to find out. Because what Marcus Whitmore didn't realize as he stood in that delivery room demanding proof of his daughter's paternity was that he'd just given me the perfect audience for what I was about to reveal. And unlike him, I had actual evidence. The next 3 hours were among the longest of Lily's life, and not because of the physical recovery from childbirth. That part she could handle. The epidural was wearing off. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache, and every movement reminded her that she'd just pushed an 8-pound human into the world. But physical pain was temporary. The emotional devastation of watching her husband treat their daughter's birth like a crime scene investigation, that cut deeper than any surgical incision ever could. Marcus had left the delivery room immediately after his announcement, phone pressed to his ear, already calling his attorney to arrange the DNA test. Eleanor followed him, but not before leaning close to Lily's bed and whispering just loud enough for only her to hear. "You should have stayed in your lane, dear. Nurses don't belong in families like ours." That comment revealed everything. This wasn't about infidelity. This was about class. This was about Eleanor never accepting that her precious son had married someone she considered beneath him. A nurse. Someone who came from a middle-class family in Queens. Someone whose parents were immigrants. Someone who didn't have a trust fund or a family estate or the right last name. After they left, Dr. Martinez closed the door and turned to face the remaining family members. She was a petite Latina woman in her 50s who had delivered over 3,000 babies in her career. But the expression on her face suggested she'd never seen anything quite like what just happened. "I need to say this professionally," she began, her accent thickening slightly with emotion. "In 26 years of practice, I have never witnessed such cruelty in a delivery room. Mrs. Whitmore, you have every right to file a complaint, and I will support you however I can." Lily's mother was pacing the room, her hands shaking with rage. "I can't believe this. I can't believe he would do this. After everything Lily did for him. Mom, please, Lily said quietly, looking down at her daughter who had finally fallen asleep in her arms. Not now. But Lisa, Lily's younger sister, wasn't ready to let it go. No, Mom's right. Everyone in this room needs to remember what actually happened. What Lily actually sacrificed. Sarah, the nurse who had been in the room throughout the delivery, was cleaning up medical equipment but clearly listening. The other nurse, an older black woman named Denise, had been unusually quiet, but now she spoke up. I've worked at Boston General for 18 years, Denise said carefully, still organizing supplies but making eye contact with Lily. I've seen Dr. Whitmore around. I've heard things. And honey, whatever you're planning, whatever you know, you make sure you protect yourself first. Men like that, men with money and reputation, they don't fight fair. The warning hung in the air. But what Denise didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that Lily had been preparing for this fight for months. Not this exact moment, not this specific humiliation, but she'd known something was coming. You don't live with someone for 4 years without learning to read the signs. Lisa sat down on the edge of Lily's bed, careful not to jostle her sister. Do you want to tell them? Or should I? Lily looked at her daughter, at this innocent baby who was already caught in the middle of something ugly, and made a decision. Tell them. Lisa nodded and turned to face their mother and the nurses. 4 years ago, when Lily and Marcus got married, he was a resident. He was drowning in student debt from medical school, working 80-hour weeks, barely making $45,000 a year. He couldn't afford his own apartment. He couldn't afford his car payment. He couldn't afford anything. Lisa, Lily started, but her sister held up a hand. No, they need to know. Lily was already a registered nurse, working at Mount Sinai in Manhattan. She was making good money, had her own place, had her life together. And then she met Marcus at a medical conference, fell in love, and gave up everything to move here to Boston with him. Patricia, Lily's mother, nodded, her eyes welling with tears. She paid his rent for 2 years. 2 years. She worked double shifts so he could focus on his cardiology fellowship. She paid off his student loans, Lisa continued, her voice getting stronger. $60,000 of his student loans. She paid for his professional licensing fees. She paid for his malpractice insurance when he was starting out. She bought him the car he drives now, the one that cost more than most people make in a year. Sarah had stopped cleaning and was now openly staring. Are you serious? Completely serious, Lisa said. And when Marcus got the position at Boston General, when he started making real money, when Eleanor started introducing him to the right people, suddenly Lily wasn't good enough anymore. Suddenly she was embarrassing. Suddenly her family wasn't prestigious enough. Suddenly everything about her was wrong. Lily felt her daughter shift in her arms and looked down to make sure she was still sleeping peacefully. It was easier to focus on the baby than to acknowledge how much the truth hurt when spoken out loud. The cousin thing, Lily finally said quietly. James Chen is actually my cousin. My father's nephew. He moved here from California last year for a job at Children's Hospital. We've had lunch maybe 4 times in 6 months. All of it documented. All of it innocent. But Marcus? She trailed off. But Marcus what? Dr. Martinez prompted gently. Lily took a breath. Marcus has been looking for an excuse. For months now he's been different, distant, paranoid, accusing me of things that made no sense. Getting angry when I talked to male colleagues. Checking my phone. Questioning where I was every minute of the day. I thought maybe it was stress from work. Or maybe he was just adjusting to the idea of becoming a father. But it wasn't that, Lisa said darkly. No, Lily agreed. It wasn't that. The door opened suddenly, and everyone tensed, but it was just another nurse bringing in paperwork. She took one look at the atmosphere in the room and quickly placed the papers on the counter. Birth certificate information, she said awkwardly. Whenever you're ready. Then she left. Lily stared at the papers from across the room. The birth certificate her husband refused to sign. The legal document that would remain incomplete until his precious DNA test came back, proving what everyone except him and his horrible mother already knew. Patricia moved closer to her daughter. Baby, what are you going to do? I'm going to give him exactly what he asked for, Lily said, and her voice had an edge now that hadn't been there before. He wants a DNA test? He'll get a DNA test. He wants proof? He'll get proof. He wants to humiliate me in front of my family? Well, he just gave me 200 witnesses to what happened in this room today. 200? Sarah asked, confused. Lily smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Marcus made his accusation in front of 7 people in this delivery room. But do you know how many doctors, nurses, and staff members are working on this floor right now? Do you know how many of them have already heard what happened? Hospital gossip moves faster than anything I've ever seen. Denise actually laughed at that. Oh, honey, you got that right. I'd bet my next paycheck that every nurse on this floor knows what Dr. Whitmore just did. And let me tell you something else. Most of the nurses here, we've all dealt with his attitude. We've all seen how he treats support staff like we're invisible. Nobody on this floor likes him. Denise, Dr. Martinez said warningly, but she was smiling slightly. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking, Denise continued. Dr. Martinez, you've seen it too. The way he talks down to residents. The way he treats nurses like servants. The way he walks around like he owns the hospital just because his mother donated money for that new cardiac wing. Lily's head snapped up. What? You didn't know? Denise looked genuinely surprised. Eleanor Whitmore donated $2 million to the hospital last year. The new cardiac research wing? It's named after her late husband. That's why Marcus got promoted to head of cardiology so fast. It wasn't just his talent, honey. It was his mother's money. The pieces were falling into place now. Marcus's sudden rise in the hospital hierarchy. His new confidence, his new arrogance. The way he'd started treating Lily like she was holding him back instead of lifting him up. It all made sense now. He'd gotten everything he wanted, and now he was trying to erase the evidence of where he came from, of who had helped him get there. There's something else, Lily said quietly. Something I found out 2 weeks ago. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Even the baby seemed to sense the shift in energy, squirming slightly in her sleep. Marcus has been having an affair, Lily said, and saying it out loud for the first time made it real in a way it hadn't been before. With a pharmaceutical sales rep named Cassandra Wright. She's 23, blonde, comes from old money. Exactly the type of woman Eleanor always wanted him to marry. Her mother gasped. Lisa cursed under her breath. Dr. Martinez closed her eyes briefly, as if disappointed but not surprised. I have proof, Lily continued. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages I recovered from the cloud backup he forgot I had access to. Photos, everything. I've been sitting on it for 2 weeks, trying to figure out what to do, trying to decide if our marriage was worth saving. And then tonight happened. Tonight he decided to accuse me of the exact thing he's been doing. Tonight he decided to humiliate me in the worst moment possible. So now I know exactly what to do. What's that? Sarah asked, clearly invested in this drama now. But before Lily could answer, the door opened again, and this time it was Marcus. He walked in like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just accused his wife of infidelity minutes after she gave birth, like this was all perfectly normal. The DNA lab can come tomorrow morning, he announced, not quite making eye contact with anyone. They'll do a cheek swab, completely painless. Results in 3 to 5 business days. He paused, then added almost as an afterthought. How are you feeling? Lily stared at her husband. This man she'd loved, this man she'd sacrificed everything for, this man who had just revealed exactly who he really was. And she smiled. I'm feeling wonderful, Marcus. Absolutely wonderful. In fact, I've never been more clear-headed in my entire life. He frowned, clearly confused by her tone. Good. That's good. My mother wants to know if we've decided on a name yet. Yes, Lily said, looking down at her sleeping daughter. Her name is Grace. Grace Patricia Chun. Chun? Marcus's face darkened. She's a Whitmore. Her last name will be Whitmore. Will it? Lily asked innocently. Because I don't recall you signing the birth certificate yet. Yet. And until that DNA test proves you're her father, I guess she'd just be Grace Chun. Unless, of course, the test reveals something unexpected. The room went very still. Marcus stared at her, trying to figure out if she was threatening him or just making a point. But Lily's face was serene, almost peaceful, as she held their daughter close. What Marcus couldn't see was the phone in Lily's hospital bag, recording every word of this conversation. What he couldn't know was that Dr. Martinez had already documented his behavior in the official medical records. What he couldn't imagine was that his perfect plan to humiliate his wife was about to become the worst decision he'd ever made. Because while Marcus Whitmore had money and reputation and family connections, Lily had something more powerful. She had the truth. And in about 3 to 5 business days, everyone would know exactly what that truth was. The DNA technician arrived at 7:30 the next morning. A cheerful woman in her 40s who seemed completely oblivious to the tension in the hospital room. She swabbed baby Grace's cheek, then Marcus's, labeled everything carefully, and promised results within 72 hours instead of the usual 5 days. Rush processing, Marcus explained after she left, as if Lily had asked. I pulled some strings. Of course he did. Marcus always pulled strings. That was his specialty now, using connections and money to make things happen his way. What he didn't realize was that while he was pulling strings in one direction, Lily was quietly pulling them in another. Eleanor visited that afternoon, bringing an enormous flower arrangement that probably cost more than Lily's monthly rent, an expression that suggested she was attending a funeral rather than meeting her granddaughter. She stayed exactly 12 minutes, spent 11 of them on her phone, and left without once asking to hold the baby. The moment those results come back, Eleanor said at the door, loud enough for the nurses at the station to hear, we'll be having a serious discussion about your future. Lily, my son deserves better than this circus. But here was something Eleanor didn't know. Her voice carried further than she thought. And standing just around the corner, pretending to review a patient chart, was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the hospital's chief of medical staff, and a woman who had watched Marcus Whitmore's meteoric rise with increasing suspicion. Dr. Walsh appeared in Lily's room 15 minutes later, after Eleanor had left. She was a tall black woman in her early 50s with silver streaks in her natural hair and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense from anyone, regardless of how much money their family donated. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, closing the door behind her. Or do you prefer Miss Chun? Lily is fine, Lily replied, adjusting Grace in her arms as the baby nursed. Lily then. Dr. Walsh pulled up a chair, which surprised Lily. Administrators didn't typically sit down for casual conversations. I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty. What your husband did in that delivery room yesterday has created significant concern among our staff. Dr. Martinez filed an incident report. Lily's eyes widened. She did? Hospital policy requires documentation of any behavior that creates a hostile environment for patients or staff. Your husband's accusation in front of medical personnel qualifies. Dr. Walsh paused. But I'm not here in an official capacity right now. I'm here as someone who has watched your husband for the past 18 months and seen concerning patterns. What kind of patterns? Lily asked, though she suspected she knew. Patterns of entitlement. Patterns of treating nurses and support staff as inferior. Patterns of leveraging his mother's donations to avoid accountability. Dr. Walsh leaned forward slightly. 3 weeks ago, he made a critical error in a patient's care plan. A nurse caught it before it could cause harm. Instead of thanking her, he reported her for questioning a physician's authority and tried to have her written up. Lily closed her eyes. That sounded exactly like the man Marcus had become. The nursing staff is aware of what happened to you, Dr. Walsh continued. And between you and me, you have more allies in this hospital than you realize. If you need anything, documentation, witnesses, professional support, you let me know. After Dr. Walsh left, Lily sat in the quiet room with Grace and allowed herself to really think about what was happening. She had allies. She had documentation. She had evidence of Marcus's affair. And in 72 hours, she'd have DNA proof that would vindicate her completely. But vindication wasn't enough anymore. Marcus had humiliated her in the worst possible moment. In front of the people she loved most. He'd looked at their newborn daughter and seen a problem to be solved rather than a miracle to be celebrated. And his mother had revealed exactly what they thought of her. That she wasn't good enough, would never be good enough, should have stayed in her lane. Well, Lily had stayed in her lane for 4 years. She'd been patient. She'd been supportive. She'd sacrificed her own career advancement, turning down promotions that would have required moving, because Marcus's career always came first. She'd smiled through Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. She'd pretended not to notice when Marcus started being ashamed of where she came from. But that version of Lily was done. The woman in this hospital bed, still recovering from bringing life into the world, was someone different now. Someone harder. Someone ready to fight. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. I talked to my friend Rachel, the one who's a family law attorney. She wants to meet with you. She says what Marcus did is called reproductive coercion and abuse, and you have grounds for so many things. Call her. Another text. This one from her mother. Your father and I are hiring a private investigator. We know you said you have evidence, but we want to make sure you have everything. No one treats our daughter this way. And then, most surprising, a text from an unknown number. Hi Lily, this is Sarah from Labor and Delivery. I hope it's okay that I got your number from your file. I just wanted you to know that about 15 nurses on our floor have written witness statements about what happened. Dr. Martinez has them all. We've got your back. Lily felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of recognition. She wasn't alone in this. She'd thought she was isolated, thought Marcus's money and family connections would protect him from any consequences. But she'd underestimated something crucial: hospital culture. Nurses looked out for each other. And Marcus had spent the past year making enemies of almost every nurse he'd encountered. That evening, Marcus returned to the hospital after his shift. He'd been working all day, hadn't even taken time off for his daughter's birth, which told Lily everything she needed to know about his priorities. He walked in carrying takeout from an expensive restaurant. Food for himself, not for her. How's the baby? He asked, sitting down and opening his food without offering her any. Her name is Grace, Lily said quietly. And she's perfect. Right! Grace. He took a bite of his meal, checked his phone, seemed distracted. My lawyer wants to meet with you after the results come back, to discuss arrangements. Arrangements? Custody, support, division of assets. You know, standard divorce procedure. The words hung in the air. He'd said it so casually, like he was discussing a lunch order, divorce. He'd already decided. Before the DNA results, before any conversation. He'd made up his mind that their marriage was over, and now he was just waiting for the proof he needed to make himself the victim in this story. I see, Lily said, keeping her voice neutral. And when exactly did you decide to divorce me? Marcus looked up from his phone, finally seeming to register that she'd asked a question. Does it matter? This clearly isn't working anymore. You're not happy, I'm not happy, and now there's a baby involved. Better to handle it cleanly. Cleanly, Lily repeated. Is that what you call accusing your wife of infidelity in a delivery room full of witnesses? Clean? That was necessary, Marcus said, his tone defensive now. I had legitimate concerns. Based on what? 4 lunches with my cousin. Or based on what your mother convinced you to believe? His jaw tightened. Don't bring my mother into this. Why not? She's been in it from the beginning. She's never thought I was good enough for you. And you've spent the past year proving her right in your own mind. Lily shifted Grace to her other arm, the baby still sleeping peacefully, unaware that her father was planning to leave them both. Tell me something, Marcus. When did you start the affair with Cassandra? She watched his face carefully, saw the flash of panic quickly covered by indignation. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Cassandra Wright, pharmaceutical sales rep, 23 years old. Blonde, trust fund. Everything your mother wanted for you. Lily kept her voice steady, clinical even. The Ritz-Carlton, room 847. Every other Thursday for the past 4 months. The charges on your personal credit card that you thought I didn't see. The text you deleted but I recovered from the cloud. Marcus stood up abruptly, his food forgotten. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, Lily corrected. Which is what you do when your husband starts acting paranoid and distant and accusing you of things you haven't done. Projection, Marcus. It's called projection. You accuse me of infidelity because you're the one being unfaithful. Basic psychology. You have no proof, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Lily smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Don't I? That's interesting. Because I have hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages, emails, and photos. I have timestamps and locations. I have everything, Marcus. Everything. The color drained from his face. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell you what. Let's make a deal. The DNA results come back in 72 hours. When they prove that Grace is your daughter, when they prove that I've been faithful this entire time, then we sit down with lawyers. Your lawyer and my lawyer. And we see who has the better evidence. Your lawyer? Marcus laughed, but it sounded nervous. You can't afford a lawyer. Can't I? That's the second assumption you've made about me this week. The first was that I was unfaithful. How did that one work out for you? Lily adjusted Grace again, the baby making small sleeping sounds. You see, Marcus, you've made a critical error. You've underestimated me. You thought I'd be broken by what you did yesterday. You thought I'd cry and beg and apologize for something I didn't do. Instead, I've been preparing. I've been documenting. I've been building a case. A case for what? But he already sounded like he knew. For everything. Infidelity, financial abuse, emotional manipulation. And here's the thing about hospital scandals, Marcus. They tend to spread. Especially when they involve someone whose mother donated money to ensure his promotion. People start asking questions. Like whether you actually deserve that position as head of cardiology, or whether it was just bought for you. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I? Lily met his eyes steadily. You humiliated me in front of my family. You accused me of cheating while I was bleeding from giving birth to your daughter. You made the first day of her life about your ego and your paranoia. So yes, Marcus, I would absolutely dare. The question is, what are you going to do about it? They stared at each other across the hospital room, and Lily saw the exact moment when Marcus realized he'd made a terrible mistake, not in accusing her that he still believed was justified, but in underestimating what she was capable of. In assuming that the quiet, supportive wife who had funded his dreams would simply disappear when he was done with her. He grabbed his coat. This conversation isn't over. No, Lily agreed. It's just beginning. After he left, Lily held Grace close and whispered to her sleeping daughter. Your daddy doesn't realize it yet, but he just declared war on the wrong woman. And in 3 days, when that test proves I've been faithful, when all his accusations fall apart, that's when the real story begins. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from Rachel, Lisa's attorney friend. I reviewed everything your sister sent me. We need to meet as soon as you're discharged. What Marcus did crosses so many legal lines. We can destroy him. Professional, financially, and legally. But we need to move fast. Lily typed back. I'm ready. Let's do this. Across town, in his luxury condo overlooking Boston Harbor, Marcus poured himself a scotch and tried to calm his racing thoughts. Lily had evidence. Somehow, his quiet little nursewife had been documenting everything, building a case against him while he'd been confident in his control over the situation. But he had resources too. He had his mother's money. He had his position at the hospital. He had connections throughout Boston's medical community. Lily was just a nurse. What could she really do? It was the same mistake he'd been making all along. The same underestimation that would ultimately destroy him. Because while Marcus was counting his money and connections, Lily was counting something more valuable. Witnesses, evidence, and a growing army of nurses who had finally had enough of Dr. Marcus Whitmore's entitled attitude. The DNA results would be back in 3 days, and Marcus had no idea that those results, the ones he was so confident would prove him right, were about to become the least of his problems. The DNA results arrived on Thursday morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. Lily was home by then, in the small apartment she'd paid for while Marcus lived in his luxury condo that she'd helped him buy. She was nursing Grace when her phone buzzed with an email from the testing lab. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she called Lisa, then her attorney Rachel, then Dr. Walsh at the hospital. "It's here," she said simply. "Are we ready?" "We're ready," Rachel confirmed. "I've already filed the paperwork. The moment you give me permission, everything goes live." "Then let's do this," Lily said. She opened the email. The results were exactly what everyone except Marcus and Eleanor already knew. 99.9% probability of paternity. Marcus Whitmore was Grace's biological father. Lily had been faithful. The accusation had been baseless, cruel, and now proven completely false. Lily forwarded the results to Marcus, to Eleanor, and to Rachel. Then she sent one more copy to an email address Marcus didn't know she had: the Boston General Hospital Board of Directors. Attached to that email was something else. Everything. 4 months of hotel receipts showing Marcus's affair with Cassandra Wright, credit card statements proving he'd spent over $40,000 of their joint savings on jewelry, trips, and gifts for his mistress. Text messages that were explicit enough to make the hospital board extremely uncomfortable. And photographs, dozens of them, showing Dr. Marcus Whitmore, head of cardiology, in compromising situations with a pharmaceutical sales representative whose company did business with Boston General. That last detail was crucial. Romantic relationships between hospital staff and pharmaceutical representatives weren't just unethical. They were illegal under federal anti-kickback laws. Every prescription Marcus had written for Cassandra's company, every recommendation he'd made, every drug trial he'd approved, was now suspect. The email also included something else: documentation of Marcus's abusive behavior toward nursing staff over the past 80 months. 23 separate incident reports that had been filed but mysteriously buried. All of them now sent directly to the board, courtesy of Dr. Walsh, who had been quietly collecting evidence of her own. By 11 a.m., Marcus's phone was ringing off the hook. The hospital board wanted an emergency meeting. His mother was calling, panicked because her friends on the board had already contacted her. And Cassandra Wright, realizing that her entire career was about to implode, had sent him 17 increasingly desperate text messages. Marcus showed up at Lily's apartment at noon, looking like he hadn't slept. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His perfectly styled hair was a mess. The confident cardiologist who had demanded a DNA test 3 days ago had been replaced by a man who was watching his entire life collapse in real time. "What did you do?" he demanded the moment Lily opened the door. "I told the truth," Lily said calmly. She didn't invite him in. "The DNA results proved I was faithful." "Did you really think that's where this would end? You sent everything to the hospital board." "My career, Lily. You're destroying my career." "No, Marcus. You destroyed your career." "I just made sure everyone knew about it." She paused. "How does it feel, being exposed in front of everyone? Having your private life made public? Having people question your integrity?" His face went red. "That was different. I had legitimate concerns. You had paranoid delusions fed by your mother's classism and your own guilt over cheating on me." Lily's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. "You accused me of infidelity in a delivery room full of witnesses because you were projecting your own behavior onto me. And now everyone knows it." Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went even paler. "The hospital just suspended me. Pending investigation." "I know. Dr. Walsh texted me 20 minutes ago." Lily shifted Grace to her other shoulder. The baby was awake now, looking around with curious eyes. "They're investigating your relationship with Cassandra Wright and whether it influenced your prescribing patterns. Federal investigators might get involved. Something about pharmaceutical kickbacks." "There were no kickbacks," Marcus said, but he didn't sound convincing. "Maybe not intentional ones. But you can't date a pharmaceutical rep and then prescribe her company's drugs without it looking suspicious. You're a cardiologist, Marcus. You went to medical school. How did you not see this coming?" He stared at her. "You planned this, all of it." "No," Lily corrected. "You planned your own destruction. I just documented it." "There's a difference." Marcus's phone rang again. This time he looked at the screen and actually flinched. "It's my mother." "You should probably answer that," Lily said. I imagine Eleanor has some questions about how her $2 million donation is now attached to a scandal involving her son's affair and potential federal crimes. Marcus answered the phone, and even from where Lily stood, she could hear Eleanor's voice, shrill and furious. He walked away from the door, phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating wildly as he tried to explain how everything had fallen apart. Lily closed the door and went back to her small living room. Her phone was buzzing constantly now. Text messages of support from nurses at Boston General. An email from Dr. Martinez offering to testify on her behalf in any legal proceedings. A message from Dr. Walsh saying the hospital was opening a formal investigation into Marcus's conduct and wanted to interview Lily as part of the process. And then, most satisfying of all, a notification that her story was trending on a private medical professionals forum. Someone, probably one of the nurses, had shared what happened in that delivery room. And now thousands of healthcare workers across the country were weighing in. The consensus was clear and unanimous. What Marcus Whitmore had done was reprehensible, and the consequences he was facing were entirely justified. If you've ever wondered whether truth really does win in the end, well, keep watching. Because what started in a delivery room with a cruel accusation was about to finish with consequences that Marcus never saw coming. Sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who end up changing everything. Rachel called at 2 p.m. Lily, it's happening faster than I expected. Marcus's attorney just contacted me. They want to settle immediately. They're offering full custody to you, child support at the maximum state guidelines, and a lump sum payment of $200,000 if you'll sign an NDA about the affair. No, Lily said without hesitation. Are you sure? That's a lot of money. I'm sure. The affair is already public knowledge. Half the hospital knows about it. Federal investigators are probably going to be asking questions. An NDA means nothing at this point. Lily looked down at Grace sleeping in her bassinet. Besides, I don't want his money to buy my silence. I want accountability. By 5 p.m., the story had spread beyond the medical community. A journalist who specialized in healthcare ethics had gotten wind of the scandal and published an article titled, "When Doctors Abuse Power, a Boston Cardiologist's Fall from Grace." It detailed Marcus's accusation in the delivery room, the subsequent DNA results proving his wife's fidelity, and the exposure of his affair with a pharmaceutical representative. The article stopped short of naming Cassandra's company, but anyone in Boston's medical community could figure it out. The comments section exploded, thousands of people sharing their own stories of doctors who had abused their power, of women who had been accused of infidelity by cheating husbands, of the medical profession's ongoing problems with hierarchy and entitlement. Eleanor tried to do damage control. She issued a statement through the family's PR team claiming that Marcus had been under tremendous stress, that the situation had been blown out of proportion, that the family requested privacy during this difficult time. But the statement only made things worse. Now people were asking questions about Eleanor's donation to the hospital and whether it had been used to cover up her son's bad behavior. By Friday evening, just 48 hours after the DNA results arrived, Marcus had lost everything. His position at the hospital was not just suspended but terminated. 3 patients had filed formal complaints about his care, emboldened by the public scandal to speak up about concerns they'd previously kept quiet. His medical license was under review by the state board. The luxury condo was being sold to pay legal fees. And Cassandra Wright, in a desperate attempt to save her own career, had given a statement to investigators confirming the affair and providing details about expensive gifts Marcus had given her, all purchased with money from the joint account he shared with Lily. That night, Marcus showed up at Lily's apartment again. This time he wasn't angry. He was broken. He stood in her doorway looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 days. "Everything's gone," he said quietly. "My career, my reputation, my family won't even take my calls. Eleanor is so furious she's disowned me. She says I've embarrassed the family name." He laughed bitterly. The name she married into. The name that was never even hers. Lily stood in the doorway holding Grace, this man's daughter, the child he'd rejected. "Did you think there wouldn't be consequences, Marcus? Did you really think you could accuse me of infidelity?" Humiliate me in front of my family and then have your affair exposed without any of it mattering? I made a mistake, he said. And for the first time he sounded sincere. I was paranoid. My mother kept saying you weren't trustworthy, that women like you always had ulterior motives. And Cassandra was there, telling me I deserved better. That I should be with someone from my own background. Your own background, Lily repeated. You mean someone rich. Someone white. Someone who didn't put you through medical school. Marcus flinched. I know what I owe you. I know what you sacrificed. Do you? Because 3 days ago, you looked at our newborn daughter and saw a problem instead of a miracle. You looked at me, bleeding and exhausted from bringing your child into the world, and you decided that was the perfect time to destroy me. Lily's voice was calm, but every word hit like a hammer. You didn't just betray me, Marcus. You betrayed yourself. You became exactly what Eleanor wanted you to be. Someone who values status over loyalty. Someone who treats people as disposable. Someone who forgot where he came from. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. It's worth very little, Lily said. But I'll make sure Grace knows you said it. Someday, when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her everything. The good parts and the bad parts. I won't erase you from her story. But I also won't pretend you were something you weren't. Marcus looked at his daughter for a long moment. Grace was awake, staring up at him with dark eyes that looked just like his. Can I hold her? No, Lily said gently but firmly. Not yet. Maybe someday when you've figured out who you actually are without your mother's money and your title and your ego. But not today. She closed the door, and through it, she heard something that sounded like a sob. But she didn't open it again. Because the man crying in her hallway wasn't the man she'd married 4 years ago. He was someone else entirely. Someone she didn't recognize anymore. And the woman standing in this apartment, holding her daughter close, wasn't the same woman who had walked into that delivery room 3 days ago. That woman had been broken by humiliation. This woman had been forged by it, transformed by it, made stronger by refusing to accept silence as the price of peace. 1 year later, Lily Chen sat in a conference room at Massachusetts General Hospital, not as a staff nurse anymore, but as a patient advocate and the founder of Medical Dignity Initiative, a nonprofit organization that helped healthcare workers who experienced abuse from colleagues or patients. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was meeting with administrators from the same hospital where Marcus had once worked, now discussing policies to prevent exactly the kind of behavior he'd exhibited. Grace was with Lily's mother today. An energetic 1-year-old who had her father's dark eyes but her mother's gentle spirit. She was healthy, happy, and completely unaware that her first moments of life had sparked a movement that changed hospital culture across Boston. Mrs. Chen, the hospital administrator began, then corrected herself. Ms. Chen, we want to thank you for meeting with us. After everything that happened, we recognize that Boston General failed you. We failed our nursing staff, and we want to make sure it never happens again. Lily nodded, listening as they outlined new protocols. Mandatory reporting for physician misconduct. Anonymous hotlines for staff to report abusive behavior. Regular training on workplace respect and professional boundaries. All changes that had come directly from what happened in that delivery room a year ago. Dr. Walsh sat beside Lily, now promoted to hospital president, after her role in exposing the corruption that had allowed Marcus's behavior to go unchecked for so long. The board also voted to return Eleanor Whitmore's donation, Dr. Walsh added. We're renaming the cardiac wing. That family's name doesn't belong on our building. It was a small victory, but symbolic. Eleanor had tried everything to suppress the scandal, spending hundreds of thousands on lawyers and PR firms, but the truth had spread too far, too fast. Her social standing in Boston's elite circles had crumbled. The women who used to compete for invitations to her charity galas now whispered about her when she entered rooms. Her friends had quietly distanced themselves. The Whitmore name, once synonymous with prestige and philanthropy, was now associated with entitlement and abuse of power. As for Marcus, his fall had been even more complete. His medical license was permanently revoked after the state medical boards. Investigation revealed not just the affair with the pharmaceutical rep, but a pattern of prescribing medications based on sales incentives rather than patient need. Federal investigators had gotten involved, and while Marcus ultimately avoided criminal charges, he'd been fined $250,000 and banned from practicing medicine in any capacity. He was working now as a consultant for a medical software company, a job his mother's remaining connections had secured for him. He made a fraction of what he used to earn. He lived in a modest apartment in a suburb Lily knew he would have once called beneath him. He paid child support every month, exactly on time, because his wages were garnished automatically. He'd asked to see Grace twice. Lily had allowed supervised visits. The man who showed up for those visits was quiet, humble, stripped of the arrogance that had once defined him. Cassandra Wright had moved back to California, her career in pharmaceutical sales destroyed. The company she'd worked for had terminated her immediately and blacklisted her across the industry. Last Lily had heard, Cassandra was working retail and living with her parents. A 34-year-old woman whose ambition had led her to destroy someone else's marriage and ended up destroying her own future instead. But Lily didn't spend much time thinking about them anymore. She'd learned that revenge, real revenge, wasn't about making people suffer. It was about building something better from the wreckage they'd created. The Medical Dignity Initiative had helped 17 healthcare workers in its first year. Nurses who'd been harassed by physicians, residents who'd been bullied by attendings, support staff who'd been treated as invisible. Lily gave them resources, legal support, and most importantly, a voice. She'd also discovered something unexpected. She was good at this work. Better than she'd ever been at bedside nursing. She'd found her calling in that delivery room, in the moment when she decided not to be silent, not to accept humiliation as the cost of peace. And now she was helping others find their voices too. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises. As Lily packed up her materials, Dr. Walsh touched her arm. "You know, when I first heard what happened, I thought it was just another case of a powerful man behaving badly. I didn't realize it would change everything." "Neither did I," Lily admitted. "I just wanted him to be held accountable. I didn't plan for any of this." "That's what makes it powerful," Dr. Walsh said. "You weren't trying to start a movement. You were just refusing to be broken. And sometimes that's all it takes." Later that evening, Lily picked up Grace from her mother's house. Patricia Chen had aged in the past year, but in a good way. The stress of watching her daughter suffer had lifted, replaced by pride in watching her thrive. She handed over Grace, who immediately grabbed Lily's hair and giggled. "She's getting so big," Patricia said, though she said this every time. "And so beautiful. She looks just like you." "She has Marcus's eyes," Lily said, because it was true and because she'd promised herself she wouldn't erase him from Grace's story. "But your strength," Patricia added firmly. "That little girl is going to grow up knowing what real courage looks like." At home, after Grace was asleep, Lily sat on her couch with a cup of tea and allowed herself to reflect on the past year. She lived in a better apartment now, not luxury but comfortable. She made more money than she had as a nurse, enough to be stable, enough to provide for Grace, enough to not wake up at 3 a.m. panicking about bills. She had full custody with supervised visitation rights for Marcus. She had a career she loved. She had her family. She had her dignity. Most importantly, she had her story. And she'd learned that stories matter. Her story had resonated with thousands of women who'd experienced similar betrayals, similar humiliations, similar moments when powerful men had tried to crush them. Those women had reached out, sharing their own experiences, finding strength in knowing they weren't alone. Marcus had tried to destroy her in that delivery room. He'd looked at their newborn daughter and seen a liability. He'd accused Lily of infidelity to cover his own guilt and to assert control one final time. But his cruelty had backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking her, he'd revealed her strength. Instead of silencing her, he'd given her a platform. Instead of proving his power, he'd exposed his weakness. Lily's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, her attorney who had become a genuine friend over the past year. "Just finished another consultation with a nurse from Chicago. Same story. Doctor humiliated her publicly. Hospital did nothing. She found your organization online. I'm sending her your way." You're changing lives, Lily. Lily smiled and typed back. We're changing lives. All of us together. Because that was the real lesson she'd learned. She hadn't won this fight alone. She'd won because nurses had documented what happened. Because Dr. Martinez had filed reports. Because Dr. Walsh had collected evidence. Because her family had supported her. Because strangers had believed her. Because a community had formed around the simple idea that healthcare workers deserve dignity and powerful people deserved accountability. Before bed, Lily checked on Grace one more time. Her daughter slept peacefully. One small hand curled into a fist, dreaming whatever one-year-olds dream about. Lily thought about what she'd tell Grace someday, when she was old enough to understand. She'd tell her that your worst day can become your strongest moment. That people who try to humiliate you often end up revealing more about themselves than about you. That silence might feel safer than speaking up, but safety bought with silence costs too much. That your value doesn't depend on someone else recognizing it. That truth is more powerful than reputation. That integrity matters more than image. And most importantly, she'd tell Grace that she was born into a moment of cruelty but raised in a legacy of courage. That her mother had faced down a man who tried to destroy her and had refused to be destroyed. That sometimes love means standing up, not standing down. That forgiveness is possible, but accountability comes first. A year ago, Marcus Whitmore had demanded a DNA test in a delivery room, trying to prove his wife's infidelity. Instead, he'd proven something else entirely, that when you underestimate people, when you mistake quietness for weakness, when you assume that power will always protect you from consequences, you write the first chapter of your own downfall. Marcus had wanted to expose Lily. Instead, he'd exposed himself. And in doing so, he'd freed her to become someone stronger, someone better, someone who turned her pain into purpose and her humiliation into healing. If there's one thing to remember from this story, it's this: the people you underestimate are often the ones who change everything. The nurse you look down on might be the one who documents your misconduct. The wife you betray might be the one who's been building a case. The woman you try to break might be the one who's actually unbreakable. And the moment you think you've won by humiliating someone is often the exact moment you've lost everything that actually matters. So, if you've ever been underestimated, ever been dismissed, ever been told you weren't enough, remember Lily's story. Remember that your truth is powerful, that your voice matters. That standing up for yourself isn't revenge, it's justice. And sometimes the best response to someone trying to destroy you isn't to fight back with cruelty, but to rise up with truth and watch them destroy themselves. Grace would grow up hearing this story. And maybe someday when she faced her own battles, she'd remember that strength isn't about being louder or richer or more powerful. It's about refusing to be silenced. It's about knowing your worth even when someone else can't see it. It's about understanding that the people who try hardest to diminish you are usually the ones most threatened by your potential. 1 year after the worst day of her life, Lily Chen had learned the most important lesson of all. You can't break someone who's already learned to rebuild herself. And that, more than any revenge, was the truest victory.